Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for today, the Visual Studio Code launch party that is for the September 2020 release version 1.50. Hope you're all doing well, and we have some fun in store for you today. My name is Brian Clark. I go by Clarkio on the internet, and we're joined by the VS Code team. And this is an experiment that we've been doing for a couple of releases now, that the VS Code team wants to be able to have close interaction with you all, give you all an opportunity to ask questions to the VS Code team and see some of the cool features that have come out in the latest release. So we hope you enjoy it. But as always, I want to remind folks that maybe aren't familiar with how to get the updates. Maybe you missed these videos. Maybe you don't get a chance to join us live. That's okay. We still have you covered because the release notes are very, very thorough and they're very helpful. And you can catch those via the website, code.visualstudio.com, or via Visual Studio itself, Visual Studio Code, I mean, itself. If you go into Visual Studio, and I'm going to share my screen if that's all right, Sana. This way I can show people what I'm talking about. Share and the browser. So now you should be able to see my screen. I'm opened up in Edge here to code.visualstudio.com. And a lot of times the latest release, they'll be in this banner at the top. Let me zoom in a little bit so folks can see better. And you can click on this link. It tells you that that's the new version that's available. It may change by the time maybe the next release you come out, you'll see it change to the next version, but you click on that and it'll bring you right to the release notes where you can go through some of the highlighted features that the team wants to call out to you, but there's much more even beyond just these bullet points that you'll be able to check out and see. And you can read through what those features are about with great screenshots. The VS Code team is now also, in a lot of the more recent releases, when they show these animated GIFs or GIFs, however you want to pronounce it, they will share the theme and the theme that they're using, because a lot of folks always want to know about customization of their favorite tool. And so in this case, this particular GIF right here is using the GitHub Lite theme. So you can check that out. Another way you can go about doing this, and I'm going to switch which screen I'm sharing here in just a moment. Stop that. And I'll show you directly in Visual Studio Code how you can go about seeing the release notes there too. So let's share our screen of Visual Studio Code. All right. And in the top banner, or the top title bar rather, there is a help menu. You click on that and you'll see an option for release notes. And what that will do is it's going to open up those same release notes, but directly in the context of the editor. So you don't need to even open up your browser. You can just go straight to your development tool, Visual Studio Code, and read about the release notes there. Now, this is the insider's version, so that's why it's not showing the September stuff, just to give people a little heads up on that. Sorry about that. All right. That said, let's jump into some of the, let me stop sharing my screen. Actually, before we jump into this, the other thing I want to remind folks is that all of these are recorded, these live events. So if you do miss them, or you have questions that you might have afterwards from watching it that you want to ask the VS Code team, they're going to be posted on YouTube. If you search for Visual Studio Code, the channel on YouTube, you'll be able to find it and look for the release launch party video there and comment on it, share your feedback and things like that you want to ask to the team. All right. That said, enough of me. Let's hand it over to the Visual Studio Code team. First up, we have Joao, who's going to be talking about VS Code support for ARM devices. Over to you, Joao.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so over the past few months, I've been working a little bit on getting VS Code to work on ARM devices, and then first came Windows, and then came Linux, which just got released with this month, and hopefully soon in the future, Apple, when they release their hardware, we will be able to run in that as well. Let me quickly do a demo. So I'm sharing my desktop. Just give it a few seconds, making sure everyone can see that. So here I am on my pretty cool Microsoft Surface Pro X. You may notice that it is an ARM-based device. It's basically a Surface device that has an ARM chip with Microsoft SQ1 processor. And until now, or until last June, we were able to run VS Code in it using this 32-bit emulation, which was pretty slow. Starting from June this year, we have ARM builds of VS Code for this specific platform on Windows. And I must say I use this all the time, and I find it to be pretty cool. Something that just released out of the Windows, so this is not a VS Code feature specifically out of Windows, was the support of WSL on ARM as well. So here I have the Windows terminal connected to WSL, and I can prove to you that this is an ARM operating system. You can see here, you can see that this is ARM, and I have a nice little setup here that I can demo what we just released, which is VS Code for Linux on ARM. Down here at the bottom, I have an X client. So this is basically a program that lets me run Linux applications from within WSL, GUI Linux applications. And when I've installed, let me show you here. I've installed the Debian package of VS Code, so I can just type code here, and boom, comes up VS Code for Linux, and I can show you that this is indeed the ARM built version running inside WSL. Of course, this is not the end scenario. This is just a way that I could show both versions of code running for ARM, both the Windows and the Linux on a single machine. So this is, to me, very exciting. Not only we can bring better performance with these specialized versions, but also improve the battery life of these devices. Back to you, Brian.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Joel. So a couple questions, and folks that are watching live right now, if you have any questions, please be sure to post them into the Q&A option there, and we'll be sure to get those, and I'll read them out for you and let the VS Code team know about your questions. But first up for you, Joel, do all extensions work as part of this when working with VS Code support for ARM devices?
That's a great question. Most extensions, so the vast majority of extensions, will work. The ones that won't work for now, or that work is being done to make them work, are the ones that depend on native components. Such examples are C# or C++ extensions. Those are being actively done, worked on. And as far as I know, most of them are about completing that work. So I don't really recall which ones are working or not, but they need to do a little bit of adoption to get it working.
Nice, that's good to hear. I kind of want to take a step back, actually, because maybe there's folks that are watching, they're not familiar with what ARM is. What's an ARM device? Can you kind of give a little brief explanation to get people some context around what this means a bit more?
Sure. ARM is a completely different CPU architecture. It's nowadays it's the most popular CPU architecture because everyone has a phone in their hand that has an ARM chip inside. Both Apple and Android are heavily based on ARM chips. These chips, since they are a different architecture, they have different priorities, and one of them is battery life. So what you get out of such devices is an incredible battery life. Plus, what they can also do is reach pretty good performance, dissipating very little heat. So for example, this device that I have, the Surface Pro X, has no fans at all. So not only it provides really good performance on low temperature, but it's completely silent even when it's on high loads.
Nice. And then just, I believe I've heard of, there's ARM and there's ARM64. What would be the difference between those two?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same difference as the standard architecture differences. So there's 32-bit and 64-bit. Windows, I believe, only works on 64 bits, but 32 bits you also have on platforms like the Raspberry Pi. For example, you can purchase a Raspberry Pi 4 and run a 32-bit operating system on it, or a 64-bit operating system on it.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that explanation of that. I think it'd be helpful for folks that maybe aren't familiar with this stuff just yet. So another question, you mentioned at the beginning, Apple Silicon. Could you elaborate a bit more on what we, as the community, what the community and developers can kind of expect regarding supporting that?
Well, we can expect the same sort of support we have today on Mac to work on the future when Apple releases new hardware. Pretty much everything should work. We're currently already exploring how that looks like using a developer machine, but it's still too early to give out an accurate timeline on when that happens.
Excellent. All right, so thank you so much, Joao. And folks, if you have questions that come up, for Joao and the VS Code support for ARM devices towards the end, we'll have a little bit more time to ask those questions. So feel free to drop those in the Q&A again. Next up, we're going to move over to Michelle, who's going to showcase the C++ extension working with IntelliSense, building and debugging on the Raspberry Pi. Over to you, Michelle.
Hi, thanks, Brian. I'm Michelle. I work on the C++ extension team. And recently, the C++ extension just released its version 1.0 or version 1. Our extension now, with in that release, it supports, as he said, ARM 32 and 64-bit on Linux machines. We are currently working on the ARM to support on Windows, so that's in progress. Hopefully, that'll be out in the next 1 or 2 releases of our extension. So for this demo, again, as I mentioned, I'll be running the device on this Pi device right here. I'm connected to it remotely, so let me go ahead and switch my screen. Share my desktop first. All right, so here I'm remote into my Raspberry Pi, and let me quickly show you what version this is of the device info, I mean. So it's a Raspberry Pi, and I'm running an ARM 32-bit operating system on it, the Raspberry, and it's a Raspberry Pi 4. And also, I want to showcase that this operating system comes installed with the GCC compiler right there, and the GDB debugger. So for those of you who aren't familiar, forgot to say, the C++ extension, again, it's mentioned, it provides IntelliSense features and debugging. It does not exactly provide the compiler and the debugger here. So you'd have to have that installed on your machine beforehand to be able to utilize some of the features of this extension. So let's go ahead and switch to VS Code. I already have a sample of a Hello World project here preset, and I just want to show you the extension installed right here. And if you go to the extension description page here, you can see, get more information about our extension if you are not familiar with it, such as tutorials on several Hello Worlds for different platforms here, including Linux, Microsoft, and Mac. And then again, this is VS Code is running on ARM right there, ARM, Linux ARM. Okay, so usually before you set up your project, you want to do some IntelliSense configuration. And what's special on each platform for these default configurations for your IntelliSense is it detects which IntelliSense mode to set for that platform. So since this is an ARM device and it detected I had a GCC compiler, it automatically selected the GCC ARM for my IntelliSense mode so that this will simulate compiling for this device and platform. So first off, I will show autocomplete. Here in the header file, I have some sample functions. And if you hover over them, there's do a quick info. And as you can see, it's using this structured documentation called Doxygen. So this extension can parse Doxygen documentation. And what that means is if it can parse them, then we can display them in this formatted manner. So I'll be using this rectangle area in my main function here. I already have something typed up, and let me just replace this guy. So autocomplete is if once I start typing, it will suggest a list of symbols or functions that it will find in my workspace. So here it found rectangle area, and if selected, it shows the information about that function. So I'll go ahead and select that. And then once I start typing in my parameters, it has this called parameter helper. So it provides information about, okay, what type of parameter or is it asking for? So for this case, asking for the first one, it's like, what's the base of my triangle? So I already have one defined here, put B. for the next one, it says H. So it switches to the information that my cursor is currently on the parameter. So let's go ahead and complete that one. And then, so that's autocomplete. And then we also want to showcase final references. So if I right click here and select final references, it will find all the references for that symbol. So it's only right now in main and in the header. And then another common one is like go to definition right here. So we'll go to the definition of that symbol, which is in header file. So that's all that I'll be showing for IntelliSense. There's many more, but those are the main ones. And now let's go on to building and debugging the project. So normally when you need to build and debug, first you have to configure this task.json files and launch.json files. I won't go into those details, but those are usually required on VS Code. But for this demo, we have a command where if I don't have those files or the extension doesn't detect that nothing is configured for this project, then it will, when I just say run debug, it will invoke something from the command palette right here and ask me, okay, which debugging template do you want? So I'm on Linux and I'm going to be using GDB for debugger, so I'm going to select that one. And then it also detects the available compilers on my machine. So I have the GCC suite, so I'll just select the G++ compiler, and then there we go. It's now auto-generating the files that I need to build and launch my program and debug it. So I created the launch.json, and I've already put breakpoints there. So it already stopped at that breakpoint. Let me go to the terminal to show the output. So here, I'm going to print out this message, and then it should print it out, and then step over these lines and then print out. Oh, it went into my function definition. And there you go, it printed it out. And that is it for my demos. If anyone has any questions.
Excellent, thank you, Michelle. So some questions for you. First off, what was in the C++ extension 1.0 release, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about some context on that?
Yeah, let me go back to, I don't have my list here. So the main ones were support for ARM32 and ARM64 for the Linux machines. And we haven't changed a log here. So let me go ahead and share my screen again so that people can find them in case they forget. Okay, so here we are. I went back to the C++ extension info page, and if you go there from details and go to our change log, every time we make a release or any of our insiders release, which is like a preview release to our upcoming release, we will list out all the changes for that version. So in version 1.1, the new features are we now support non-UTF file encodings, and again, the ARM64 devices, and also this VC formatting option where we enable like Visual Studio when I say style formatting for your source code. And then there's a bunch of configurations so that you can configure however you want to format your code. And then we also list some enhancements and bug fixes. So these are our main features that we release for version 1.
Very nice. Another question for you. Is the C++ extension supporting both Windows and Linux ARM devices? Since that's a common theme we're talking about for the release this time around. So what are your thoughts on that? What's the support for it?
Support, sorry, could you repeat that? For Windows and Linux, will they both be supporting?
Linux ARM device, yeah, Windows and Linux ARM devices.
Yeah, so right now it does support both, the Linux devices, ARM devices. However, for Windows, we are currently in progress working on that one. So hopefully it'll be in either the next release or the second one, the second coming release. So those are like the timelines. And hopefully once the VS Code supports Mac, we'll be able to adapt to that as well once that hardware is out.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I just have to comment because you know, I generally do mostly web development, so I don't know C or C++ that well other than from like schooling time. And it just never ceases to amaze me to see how versatile VS Code can be, thanks to you all and team and the extensions that get built out to provide that support to do all these interesting development workflows for whatever people are working on. So thank you on behalf of you know, the community. Thank you for your work on that.
You're welcome. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate that demo. We have next is Connor, who's going to show us the latest JavaScript debugger features, the real-time performance views, and my kind of personal favorite, honestly, because no development, this is really important, flame charts to show where are the bottlenecks in your code. So I'm really excited to see that, Connor. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks. So two new features this month are the real-time get performance views, as well as specifically its left heavy flame charts. And I'll explain what that is in a second. So so first of all, this is available inside of the flame chart extension. So like neither of these two features are built in, but if you install the VS Code.js profile flame extension, then these will be available to you. So first of all is the real-time performance view. So with this extension installed, when you start debugging either a node process or a browser process like Chrome, then what you'll see, yes, there's a real-time view of, for example, the CPU and heap usage of your program in Node.js. And there are a couple different options you can use to configure the view. So like you can show them on one chart, which is default, or you can split them onto multiple different charts, which is useful if you have a lot of different stats here. And then you can also enable and disable different stats as well. For browser debugging, there are other metrics available as well. So if I debug the link, so if I debug, for example, github.com, just take just a second. So opening my browser, and now like you can see here, we also have metrics for like the number of DOM nodes, the number of relayouts and restyles that are done per second, which can be bottleneck, especially in very complex applications. So for example, if I resize the window, you'll probably see that the number of relayouts and restyles goes up because then the browser has to recompute how the page is laid out. And if you have lots of animations or something going on, depending on how you have it set up, that can be very inefficient, and this can help you spot those bottlenecks. So also, yes, say this is good for getting an overview of how much time is being taken and how much resources is being taken. But if you want to actually drill into what's going wrong, you have to actually take a profile. So to do that, there's actually a button here that will link you right to the CPU profiler. So if you click that, then you can debug, and we can say, let's debug this until I stop it. And now it's debugging, so I'll have to go for just a second or so. And then to stop it, there's the stop button here, and it's also inside the call stack view. So I can stop that. And then by default, this opens the table, which is a bottom-up table, just telling you how much time is taken in each function. So with the flame chart extension, there's also a button here. There's a little fire icon, and if you click that, this opens the flame chart. And this flame chart actually existed before as well, but what's new is what we call the lift-heavy view. So because inside of this process, basically we have a busy work cycle, and then we do work, and then we just repeat that a bunch of times. And this is actually very, very similar to what, for example, an Express server or some HTTP server will do when you get incoming requests. You serve the request, and then you respond. And each individual request is pretty fast. So what the left heavy view does, because just in this view, it's kind of hard to get a sense of what takes up time, because in the chronological view, you just have a request basically, and you see a bunch of very thin call stacks here. But what the left heavy view does is basically it automatically groups the call stacks and then combines similar call stacks call stacks together. So I can toggle this view by clicking on this left heavy icon here, and basically what this did is that it combined all of those requests and then just summed up each unique call stack, and then gave me a performance view based on that. And so now it's really easy to see that, for example, most time is spent in pack-a-match.test, and then there's a bit more time spent in these functions. And this is super useful, like as I said, especially when you're like dealing with servers that have requests and responses, or very, very kind of like messy chronological call stacks. You can group them together and then get a very simple way to see better information about your performance. So that's about it for what I wanted to show. Do you have any questions?
Of course, Connor. I have lots of questions. And thank you so much for the demo. That's my jaw dropped a couple times. I'm just going to say. So thank you for showing off all that. And the flame graph, I can't express it enough. I'm super excited about that. So speaking of that, though, can you? I mean, we all love to, the developers in the community love customization of their tools, VS Code and the theming and the icons and stuff like that. Is there a possibility to customize the coloring of the flame chart?
There is. So I can go ahead and show you real quick. So if I go to my settings, come down here. So the flame graph color is actually based on, ignore all of my, I'm not sure if I actually have any color customization. So it's set based on the chart.red color of your theme. So if I change that to something else, or charts.red, I think. Yep. So if I change that to something else, then it basically takes like that color and then like does a bit of like adjusting of hue and saturation. So if I make this very red, then that's very red as well. If I make this whatever this color is, then it'll be very green. And you can see the real-time view also depends on this as well. So you saw this color change as well. But yeah, like these colors are actually new inside of this release. So these are made to be colors that extension authors can use for like whenever they do data visualization. They can use these colors, and then extension or theme authors can then make these fit in really nicely with their themes.
Nice. That's really cool. And I guess so the keys there to work on is workbench.color customization settings, and then knowing what the fields are. So it's charts.red, charts.orange. The default colors would be, you're going to override those is kind of what you're doing, right?
Yeah. And currently the default colors are we have decent defaults for most themes, but because it is new, most themes don't have a specific color set. So you might want to tweak that if you have a theme, or you might just want to tweak that in your user settings if you don't like your theme's defaults right now.
Nice. Okay. I also noticed when you were demoing that this involved like having a separate extension, right? Is there any possibility or plans in the future to have it added as natively as the default debugger?
So the ability to take profiles is actually built in. It's just like the flame chart itself, as well as the real-time chart, is separate, and we kind of want to keep the VS Code core pretty slim and light. So currently don't have plans to actually have this be built in, but if it happens, yes, that the flame icon is still shown even if you don't have the extension installed if you do take a profile. But if you click that without the extension installed, it'll actually open the Marketplace tab and bring up the extension to hint to you that you should install it to access this. Not currently, but that's been brought up a few times. But right now we don't have any plans to make it built in.
Okay. Well, it's still nice to have, even if it's a separate extensions. Thank you for all your work on that. One other just quick comment. I saw you're giving your computer so much busy work. I hope you give it a break. Some real work.
Yeah. On the weekends, I usually I'll give the day or two off. So.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Connor. All right, folks. Next up, we have for you is Miguel, who's going to show off the pin tabs feature and the new settings for it. Over to you, Miguel.
All right, thanks, Brian. I'll go ahead and just share my screen. And so for those of you who are not too familiar with pin tabs, we actually launched this feature a couple of versions ago. So if you are in VS Code and you essentially, so if you have tabs enabled here, if you right click on any tab, there's a new option to pin it. And so what this will do is it'll kind of similar to your browser, it'll basically make a smaller version of the tab. And so we shipped this one a couple of versions ago. We got a lot of feedback on this one. And so actually, just to take a step back, we actually had this issue open probably for about 4 different years and got lots of upvotes. So we finally kind of added this year. We got a lot of feedback about wanting to improve how the pin tabs show up. And so we've kind of got a lot of feedback from the community and iterated. So we have a couple of different options we've enabled. So if you go into the settings, now the default, so before the original behavior was called compact, and now the default is normal. So this now, when you pin a tab, it actually just stays the same width as it does in the name. So you actually can see the name. So previously it was just the file icon, which may or may not be helpful. Now when you pin a tab, it actually has the full name there. So it takes up the entire width of the tab text. And we have a couple of other options we've also enabled. The other one is shrink. And so this is sort of like a hybrid of the other two, where it'll show a couple of characters of the name of the tab, and then it'll basically kind of shrink it and have a little bit of a fade if the text is longer than it needs to. And then as you hover, you'll notice that there is a pin icon on here now. And so this indicates that the tab is now pinned. And if you try to close all of your tabs, so for example, if you, I have a shortcut that closes all of the editors. So it basically closes all the tabs. With pin tabs, they actually don't close. So the only way that these actually close is you actually have to unpin them and then be able to close. So that kind of helps if you're trying to, hit, Control or Command W and you accidentally close the pin tab. So it just allows the tab to always be persistent there. So that's kind of one of the new features that we added there. One of the other things that we also added is if you have a couple of different tabs open, let me open a couple of different different files. We have a new setting that allows you to change the color of what we call the last pin border. So if I have a couple of pinned items here, so you see these two items here, there's this little border on the left-hand side. Let me move this over to the side. So we have this new setting called last pin border. And by default, we try to pick sort of a color that would work well with most themes, but you can actually customize this color by using this color token called last pin border. So this one, you can kind of, depending on what your theme is and how strong you want this to look, you can kind of play around with the colors of whatever will work best with your theme. So depending on how much of a color you want, and this just basically indicates where the pin tabs start. The other thing with pin tabs is that if you have a bunch of files open, so like let's say I open a couple of different files here, the pin tabs will actually always stay on the left-hand side. So if you have a lot of tabs that are overflowing, we'll always show the pin tabs first. So those have the first priority. So you can have lots of tabs or lots of editors that are open, but they always kind of scroll. The ones that are not pinned kind of stay to the right-hand side. The ones that are pinned are always on the left-hand side. And then we also show them on the left-hand side for open editors as well. So yeah, so those are a couple of the new features that we've added. We're currently working on kind of continuing to improve this. One of the new things we're adding for this month is when they're in the pin state to show the pin icon that's always visible. So that has a stronger indication that what items are pinned are now visible. And then if you have autosave turned off, then we kind of have a hybrid of an icon of when a tab is dirty and needs to be saved. So yeah, if anybody has additional feedback for this, we're open to listen to the community and see what else everybody's interested in offering.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Miguel. Some questions for you. Well, one really quick, it seems like a lot of this stuff, when people want to be able to customize the coloring, one, there's the theming that takes over that kind of stuff, right? And then on top of that, though, regardless of what theme you use, you can override those via these workbench.color customization options. As you just demonstrated and Connor had demonstrated with the flame graph stuff. So that's a cool thing to note and emphasize for everybody. So a question from the community for you, Miguel, and it's from supposedly Sam. So Sam, thank you for your question. The question is, what do the tabs look like if your window is small enough, you shrink it down so much that you have to start scrolling through the tabs, or maybe you have so many tabs open you got to start scrolling them. What do those tabs look like? How do we manage that experience?
Yeah, so we actually have a min width that we kind of set on a lot of the tabs, and it does depend on what kind of a tab setting you have. So depending on if you're using pin tabs, what setting you use. So we kind of essentially try to have like a minimum width for each individual tab, and then we also have like a minimum width for the entire container. And that's at one point where you start scrolling everything horizontally. So we kind of try to figure out what would be the best size that would kind of fit there, and then kind of have the overflow just kind of scroll over to it.
Excellent. So I hope that helps, Sam. And then another question for you, Miguel. Can you have a row of pin tabs and a row of unpinned tabs, open ones, such as what folks might be familiar with from Visual Studio, proper?
Yeah, that's definitely, that was the second #1 or the second most upvoted feature on top of the pin tab one. So that is definitely a requested feature that we have. We'll post a link in the discussion if anybody wants to kind of follow the discussion and chime in with your feedback. But that's not yet currently possible, but it's something that the community has asked for.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Miguel, for the demo, and thanks to everybody from the VS Code team. Folks, that concludes all the demos for now. But really quick, a couple little less, logistics type of. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right word. The words are escaping me right now. But a couple little things to leave you off with before we go. One is this next iteration, the October release that's going out, the team is having a focus on housekeeping, which means there's going to be less focus on features and more about addressing issues and bugs. And in addition to that, working on the GitHub code spaces experience. If you're not familiar with that is, you could check out, if you go to, I think it's GitHub. Does anybody have a link I could share or I can call out? I forget it off the top of my head. It's like github.com/features code spaces or something like that. So that's going to be the other part of the focus for the October release. So just a heads up to everybody on that. What's to come for the next release to get you excited about that. The other thing I want to mention with that as well is a tool that's built by a community member, Benjamin Lannon. He built out this tool that's the issue tracker for Visual Studio Code team and how they progress and all that. So let me get that link open so I can show you all that. It's really interesting to take a look at and see, one, like the amount of issues that are open for an open source project like this, and how the team works very diligently and hard to address them and try to get to all of them. So the link for that really quick is going to be at VS Code GitHub. I should have had this open already. I'm sorry about that. Just bear with me a moment. That open. Okay, great. I have it open. I'm going to share my screen. So this is that tool I'm talking about. Again, this is Benjamin Lannon in the community who put this together, and it shows you the progress and where things are trending in terms of issues within the VS Code project up on GitHub. If you're interested, check that out as well. Last but not least, stop sharing really quick. Last but not least, just a reminder, if you missed this or you have more questions that come up after and watching it, maybe you're working on some of this stuff and using those new features that you saw demonstrated by the team today, feel free to check out the YouTube video that will be posted to the Visual Studio Code channel. Also, if you have more questions too, Twitter is another area where the VS Code team is actively listening. That's twitter.com/code if you want to check that out there as well. With that, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in for the live stream, or if you're watching this later on in the video recording, thank you so much. We hope you got some value out of this, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. And thank you all in the VS Code team. This was all amazing. Excellent demonstrations. Well done, everybody. All right. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.